I'm not surprised that the church sometimes is confused about the role of apologetics, and either in church life or how does it relate to the teaching of Scripture. If we could just teach the Scripture, do we really need to teach apologetics? And we can make a case, of course, for apologetics from Scripture. And the evidential nature of Scripture is always striking to me. The fact that Jesus seldom would preach anywhere where he didn't at some point refer to the miracles he was also working. In John, as a matter of fact, he would say, if you don't believe what I'm telling you, at least believe on the evidence of these miracles. In Acts 1, he spends another 40 days with the disciples after the resurrection, giving them many additional convincing proofs. What is that about? Why is he so interested in making a case to the eyewitnesses? Well, because he knows that's exactly what they are. They are going to be eyewitnesses. He talks about commissioning them as eyewitnesses. Blessed are those who will know this is true, but never got to see me, Thomas, the way that you're seeing me. Why? Because they will trust your eyewitness testimony. And he commissions them as eyewitnesses. That form of evidence is called direct evidence. Jesus had a really high regard for direct evidence. Even when John the Baptist is having doubts and sends people to him to ask, Jesus, John sent us, he wants to know, are you the one? I mean, I think that Jesus could easily have spanked those guys, right? He said, are you kidding me? This is my cousin. He's asking, he's baptized me. Now he's got questions. Instead, he works miracles in front of John's disciples and says, go back and tell John what you just saw. That's a high regard for making a case. And Jesus was the first to do that. And his disciples, his apostles, did that in the book of Acts repeatedly. But what is their role? I think sometimes there is a theological resistance in the church to apologetics. I mean, after all, doesn't the word have power? Can't we just preach the gospel plainly? And doesn't God's Spirit do the rest? Well, of course, I believe that no one comes to Jesus except if the Father calls. That's something we know is biblical. And I believe that's true. But I think what happens is that I can construct walls in front of the gospel to prevent myself from hearing the gospel clearly. And if you were someone like me who spoke this evidence language that I speak, you'd have to learn how to speak my language. Look, I think that word does have power. But you would agree if you were going to Swahili and you don't speak Swahili, you'd have to at least translate the words of the Bible. You wouldn't go and say, hey, the gospel's got power spoken in English, even though nobody understands English. There are a lot of folks in our culture right now who don't see the Bible as English. They have constructed a barrier between themselves and the Bible. A lot of it is just language, the way they might approach certain things. The way, for me, it was, you got to show me a way in through the evidence. That was my language. That was kind of how I processed everything. If you can learn to speak my language, you have a chance to share the gospel with me. So a lot of what we do in terms of apologetics, in terms of making the case for Christianity, is simply learn to speak the culture's language in a way that they can now hear the gospel they couldn't hear before. Maybe with only the standing in their way is this objection that they've been holding up and clinging to that you can at least help pull down so they can hear the gospel clearly. So I think part of this is that this is a natural, these are connected at the hip, apologetics and evangelism. As a matter of fact, they're so connected, they're the same thing. I think apologetics is just another way of evangelizing, but first learning the language of culture.